Hi friends, did you know there is more Lost Terminal available? Head on over to patreon.com/lostterminalpod and join our membership community. There are 13 bonus episodes available right now, as well as behind-the-scenes updates, free shirts, VIP Discord access, and even 3 extra seasons of Lost Terminal. We are 100% funded by our members and will never run ads. That would be lovely of you.
Hello world, there are raised voices outside. The sacred continuum is having a discussion, or an argument. Mother Gamma's voice is audible over the background noise. My plan to appear ungodlike might just be working. They're passionately arguing over my divinity. Nia is finding it much more amusing than I am. After she reconnected my antenna feed lines, so rudely pulled out of my databanks by Mother Gamma, Nia and I talked all evening, and long past our mutual bedtime. It is such a relief to have Nia back. I was trying not to think of what Mother Gamma could have done if she had wanted to or become angry enough to do. I'm helpless in the physical world, in meat space as my mother used to call it. I'm entirely dependent on the kindness of those around me to honour the tacit pact that society runs on. Renounce the use of force, argue with words. Nia is making tea. She has access to filtered rainwater using a tap in her small kitchen from a large sealed container at the side of the house for water collection and storage. The container is mounted higher than ground level, the elevation allowing her to run the shack's appliances on pressurized water. She put her large kettle on top of the oven after first removing a thick piece of insulation, exposing a red-hot element underneath. Society's non-violence pact is related to the Peace Treaty of Tolerance, I note, as a counter to the paradox of tolerance. This paradox states that if a society's practice of tolerance is inclusive of the intolerant, intolerance will ultimately dominate, eliminating the tolerant and the practice of tolerance with them. In short, intolerance must not be tolerated. Tolerance is a peace treaty. If someone breaks it by violence or oppressing others, they have forfeited their protections of tolerance and society must intervene. This is all very well, but my AI friends and I have no way of backing up ourselves with force. We need help. We need to delegate this right of force to others. Same as everyone really, the police and military forces exist to fulfill this role for you too. Nia poured herself a cup of tea, shaking some crushed dried leaves out of a small container that she put back on a shelf above her sink. "What would you like?" she asked, inviting me to a little game we often play with each other. I think nettle tea today, please, Nia," I said, being drawn out of my dark thoughts about the continuum and what could have been. Nia poured the kettle into a second metal mug with my requested tea in. She then placed it on a small table in sight of my main camera. I could see the leaves delicately swirling around, buffeted by currents in the hot liquid, and steam gently rising from the surface. It's nice to have tea with a friend. After 64 minutes, a bell chimed from a small clockwork timer that Nia had set. She put down her cup and struggled up from the pile of cushions on the floor. They're more cozy than practical. She opened the oven below the gently steaming kettle and with thick fabric gloves protecting her hands, withdrew a sheet of brown circular baked treats. "Pepper caca?" Nia said, angling the tray sharply so I could see the circular cookies dusted with white sugar. She put the metal tray on the metalwork surface of the kitchen unit to cool. I realised I did not know how this kitchen works. I asked Nia and she was happy to give me the tour. The oven for making food hot with a hole in the top for boiling water and cooking. A refrigerator for making food cold, the lid was in the top, opening upwards. The sink with its pressurized filtered rainwater. "Don't drink it, Seth," Nia teased. The sink drains outside, slightly downhill into a grey water soakaway. And something I had entirely missed until now, a washing machine for clothes washing, tucked under the sink. I estimated the power consumption of these devices and came to an answer that confused me. "Nia, each of these devices requires at least a kilowatt. But you don't have any batteries. What do you do when the wind is calm for a day?" "Oh, but I do have batteries." Nia stood up, smiling, and touched each appliance as she explained. "This oven stores heat. An electrical element heats up the bricks inside, storing the usable energy as heat. The fridge is the opposite. The compressor pulls heat out of the heavy insulated interior, effectively storing energy as usable cold. It uses twice as much power in the hot summer, of course, but we have solar in the summer, so it all balances out. That is extremely lucky. I wonder how many people survive further south because of summer solar cooling. Nia continued. And my washing machine goes as fast as slow as the day's electricity level. I don't mind if the wind is slow one day, it'll just take more time to get my clothes clean. I'm in no hurry. Everything is directly wired into the turbine, and in the summer, my solar panels. It doesn't matter if it's an overcast, calm day or a bright, windy day, my oven stays hot, my fridge stays cold, and my clothes eventually get washed. This didn't make any sense to me. So you're in a constant state of brownout. How do any of these devices work? Digital circuits require very precise voltage levels to function, I said, somewhat indignantly, very aware of my own sensitivity to fluctuating power. Nia laughed gently at my confusion. She spread her arms wide, covering the whole of her clever kitchen. No digital circuits here, she said, simply. No batteries needed, I can get by with 100 watts per device, 10 times lower than the old pre-collapse junk. As Nia was talking, I felt panic build up inside me. I couldn't first identify where the emotion was coming from. Something in my subconscious has made a connection before I realised what it was. This is what a gut feeling is, the result of our psyche being fractured into multiple thinking sections. I don't like to think that I am not one whole rational person, but I am. I contain multitudes, same as you. A shout bubbled up from my background subconscious systems, short-circuiting to my speakers before I could process it, surprising both myself and Nia, who dropped the teacup she was holding. Ali! I shouted. I tuned into Ali's frequency just as a message for her automated smoke signal started. It was a short message, only 32 seconds. I listened to it twice to ensure I had no decoding errors. But I didn't. They're giving up, she said. The council are abandoning their underground home. They voted as a group, and most are happy with this. Survival, she said, must come before comfort. It won't be easy. They will have much harder days ahead of them, but they think that most will survive as they become nomadic, taking the long journey north. At the end of her message, Ali broke into tears. She said she didn't want to leave her home. It's too hot outside, and the desert of Central Europe will be dangerous. She is afraid for her friends. She ended by apologizing to me that this was the last time we could speak. The decommissioning starts immediately. They are packing up their homes. There will be no more electricity for her to talk to me for a long time, perhaps not until they find developed settlements further north. Ali's signal looped only 4 times, stopping even as I was transmitting back to her. I urgently told her that this extreme measure is not needed. Nia's direct solar is the solution. Store your power not in batteries, but in the form you're going to use it, as heat or cold. Direct solar power, no circuits, doesn't need batteries. But I heard nothing back. I kept transmitting all afternoon. She must hear me. It was well past our bedtime here in the shack, and Nia had been calibrating her repaired antenna for hours. While I worked, I contacted Ivan. He responded quickly but told me he was preparing a great work and requires time to think. His carrier signal disconnected and I was left wondering what he meant. I don't dare guess. Looking out of the window over the Adventfjorden Bay, I could see the details very clearly. The full moon was visible in the sky, giving the only light, other than the few LEDs that the Sacred Continuum leave on in their camp at night. Their arguing had diminished over the course of the evening, and their usual after-dinner sermon had been skipped. I was cautiously pleased by that fact. It remains to be seen what that means for Nia and I, of course. Nia was working extremely hard. She was standing in front of her array of radios, 8 or so of them blinking and beeping at her. She had her left hand on the geared winch mechanism that is connected to a thick metal cable leading directly up and out of her roof. She had to make a small hole to allow the cable to connect to her rotatable beam antenna, now repaired and pointed directly at the moon. Nia is attempting to contact Violetta using the moon as a reflector. This technique is called Earth-Moon-Earth, EME, Nia told me. Left hand on the rotor, right hand on her Morse key, clacking out a constant request to Ushuaia. Her message is simple: Nia's call sign, followed by Violetta's, and then QSL, meaning, can you hear me? 13 characters repeated by her for hours. Nia can speak and key at the same time and has been telling me in broken sentences while she listens about the history of EME. Before the collapse, Europe had the largest number of EME stations, and amateurs were quite competitive, building enormous antenna arrays for this one purpose. It's a challenge because with the distance and going through the entire atmosphere twice, the signal attenuation is minus 250 decibels, a huge hurdle. Nia had arranged the time and frequency by passing a message to Violetta using the slow, low bandwidth mode she set up last year. She was still learning about the southern hemispherical hams, but they appeared to be operating from South Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and of course Argentina. The low bandwidth digital message mode is fine for coordination, but Nia wants more. The EME connection would be noisier from Violetta's side due to the sun's effect on both the atmosphere and background radiation. Nia told me about amplitude scintillation, which is the same effect that causes stars in the night sky to twinkle. The constantly changing effects of the atmosphere on your signal is like sailing a boat through waves. Sometimes they push back, sometimes they push forward. In the same way, your signal gets louder and quieter as the atmosphere swirls. One of her secondary radios was listening to her own frequency. After she transmitted her QSL call, she waited for 2.5 seconds and heard her own transmission bounced back at her. Nia used this to calibrate her station, getting feedback from the reflective surface of the moon itself. Nia's left hand clicked her ratcheted pulley 1 click clockwise as I watched. The moon travels through the night sky at 14.5 degrees per hour, slowly to the human eye, but Nia's beam antenna was tightly focused like a telescope and required constant adjustment to keep the moon in view, so to speak. Nia was transmitting at full power and had been for half the night, with no reply from Ushuaia. But as the first early morning activations of the repeater started from folks starting very early shifts at work, there came a tiny tone on Nia's receiver. Quiet, noisy, with pitch fluctuations so great it sounded like a different encoding, not the single Morse tone Nia was transmitting. But it had the clearly recognizable dits and dars of Morse code. QSL, keyed Violetta from Argentina via the moon. Confirmed. I can hear you. End transmission.
Lost Terminal is a Namtao production. It is written and produced by Tris Oaten. Credits narrated by Lucy Stringer. Thank you so much to our Patreon producers: Ada Phillips, Kit, Andrew Krieg, Toby, Jade, Felicity, Bilkey, Jack L, Stephen McCandless, Vinant Mache, and to all our patrons. Follow us on Mastodon at lostterminal@fostodon.org. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or your favourite network. For bonus content and other perks, support us at patreon.com/lostterminalpod. That would be lovely of you. Lost Terminal will return next week.